So when we create motion graphics in After Effects, obviously we deal a lot with vectors, we deal a lot with raster images. Those are all really part of the process of bringing those still images in and working with them and adding motion to them. But another thing that's really important too is working with, especially if you're doing visual effects and especially if you're doing 3D, working with videos and frame sequences. So this is really After Effects' raison d'etre. This is the reason why it's around, is because you can use it to edit video and apply special effects to video that you normally wouldn't be able to with Photoshop or Premiere. So this is really where the niche happens. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can get image sequences and also video into After Effects and work with it and get it into your compositions and some of the things you have to look for. So if we go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import a couple of videos in here, show you how it works. I'm going to right click inside of here into my projects bin, and I'm going to go and I'm going to select file. You can do this a couple different ways to import, right? But nonetheless, I'm going to find a couple videos here. The nice part about this is that you can select multiple videos at once. So on Windows, I'm going to control select them. Right? You can shift select, control select. On a Mac, I think it's that little doodad. I think it's an apple or an option or something like that. It's that thing that's right next to the space bar on a Mac. You can go ahead and select multiple ones with that key too. And I can select multiple ones here and import them all as footage. I'm going to open that. And it's just as easy as that. It brought them in, right? So now I have pieces of video footage that I can put into a composition and work with. Something that you'll need to look at here is you can right click on this one file and you can interpret the footage. This interpret footage main window is really important because you just want to make sure that you're conforming your footage to the right frame rate. So later on when we start talking about time manipulation and we talk about footage that's captured at really, really high frame rates, sometimes you might want to actually conform that to a different frame rate in order to make it start out slow. So anyhow, this is something to keep an eye on. You always want to just double check it, make sure your footage is coming in at the right frame rate, because sometimes you'll get some funky behavior and you'll wonder what it is and it'll just be the wrong frame rate. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new composition. The shortcut for that is Control N, but you can also do it from here on this icon here. In my composition settings, I'm going to make sure I'm going to set up 720p, 24 frames per second, and I'm going to set this my first video comp, right? Nothing crazy. So now I have a new composition here. Now I can go ahead and I can add my video in here as layers. So we're used to working in layers by now, so it's not unusual that you could see this over here as a series of frames. The difference between this and one of the static layers that we're used to dealing with as a vector or a raster is that this actually has a time limit on it, because there's only a certain amount of frames in here before it ends. So that's something that you just have to keep in mind. There's different ways to extend the time and work with time, and we'll talk about that later. But nonetheless, you can put this video in here and you can put another video on top of it, right? And you can have them, you can have them work at different times. You can cut the time in and the time out. Now, it is important to note too that After Effects is not a replacement for Adobe Premiere. I've seen people painfully try to edit video and use After Effects as their primary editing tool. It's not an A/B video editor. That's just something to keep in mind. Really, we try to reserve After Effects for some of the more special effects, heavy lifting. If you want to do just a regular interview B-roll A/B edit with some minor pan and scan, then you're going to want to go for Premiere. But After Effects is uniquely good at taking video and applying all kinds of special effects and color effects and things to it. So something you can go ahead and you can manipulate all of the different aspects of this that you would anything else. So I'm shortcutting to the scale, right? And let me scale that down to about 33%, right? Just right. So maybe I'm going to scale that. I can scale and position this stuff. So again, I'm going to maybe scale this footage down to 33. Right. So I've kind of got two pieces of footage here at the same size. I can move and manipulate them just like all of the stuff we've been dealing with up until now. So maybe they come up here and they align. Right. So you can see that it works just like our rasters and our vectors. And maybe I want to kind of just have that position up here, and then I'm going to have it start down here and go like so, right? So as you can see, you can have it work in different ways. So I can go ahead and preview that, and like I said, it works just the same as it would if you were doing this using using regular vectors or regular rasters. So something to consider. And you just have to be mindful of the timing, right? So the timeline kind of petered off there, so we lost it over here because there aren't any frames to cover it. So just something to keep in mind. So that's how we deal with video. Another thing is if you're dealing a lot with 3D graphics or 3D compositing or visual effects where you're combining the two, something to consider is you need to deal a lot with image sequences, which is a little bit trickier. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import a file. In here I have a frame sequence already set aside with an alpha channel. It was something I rendered in 3D. So we can go in here and we can select this and import this as footage. Something to keep in mind over here is this, we want to make sure that we have it checked to import as a sequence. After Effects is smart enough that it's going to see that first frame and it's going to be able to count all of the ones after that and import that as a target sequence or a ping sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press OK. This is interesting because this is a dialog box that's asking me about the alpha channel. So you just want to make sure you pay attention to how you render out your alpha channel. In this case, I've rendered this one straight unmatted, but sometimes if you're dealing with Maya, by default, I believe that it outputs as pre-multiplied. So that's something you just have to pay attention to, and if you get some fringes or anything around your 3D objects, then this is probably the main culprit that you'll need to go back and look at. If you need to get back to those settings, you want to go back to interpret the footage and main, which coincidentally I need to go back there because it's going to pick a default frame rate for this footage. I want to make sure that this is, this conforms to what I want it to be. So if it was my intent to render at 24 and have it run at 24, I need to specify that here. It's not going to automatically read my mind when I'm putting a frame sequence in. So that's something you have to check, and that's a common pitfall, is setting the wrong frame rate for an image sequence. So now I have this image sequence, and I can go ahead and set up another composition, right? So I'll call this gremlin, right? Now I can take this image sequence here and I can drop it. Oops. I can take this image sequence here and I can drop it in here as a layer, and you'll notice that it runs. Now this is a little trickier on the processor to run it, but this is how I can do it. And I can add in the back. I can add in just to show you that it is completely transparent. I can add a video in the background, and you've noticed it's a target sequence, so it should work. And you can see the alpha channel works nicely here. So I can go ahead and this is not very high quality, but this could be the beginning of something where you're doing visual effects or something of that sort. So you can go ahead and you can frame preview that, and you can see how those two things can go together really easily with an alpha channel and an image sequence. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to that workflow there.